Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a review. This one is for Cartographers. It is a role-player tale, another one in the series from Thunderworks Games. It is a 1 to 100 player game. You have that right. If you have enough maps, you can certainly play with 100 people.
You can play with as many as you want.
Although I'd like to see you try. So this is really cool. This is a, well, it comes from the genre of roll and write, but it's actually a reveal and write.
Yeah, it's more similar to Welcome To or games like that where every turn you're flipping cards over and you have to make a decision based on the information on those cards. So there are no dice in this game.
Exactly. All right, so everyone's going to start with one of these sheets of paper. It is a two-sided sheet, and you can play with either side. They're both different. One side has just normal terrain, of course, with mountains, and you also have ruins. And on the other side, you have this big gaping hole, and that will factor into how you place your buildings through the course of the game. Of course, you can be crafty. You can put your name up here in some weird way, some kind of title, even put your shield or an edict up across the top as well. So the game's going to be played over 4 rounds or 4 seasons, and those are going to be represented by these particular cards that you have in front of you. You have spring, summer, fall, and then winter. And each of these times, it's going to tell you one of 2 different Queen's edicts that you're going to score.
And there are a variety of these. So you lay out the 4 different cards for the different edicts, and then the cards themselves are going to show you some kind of pattern that you want to complete, and then how many points you're going to get for completing that pattern. Now, a lot of times this pattern wants you to have completed certain columns or rows or different patterns. Sometimes it actually wants you to leave spaces empty.
Each one of these different edicts that you see here is also going to be drawn from a very particular deck. Each of these decks has 4 cards in it, so the randomness in the game and which way they're going to score is completely random. Some of them are going to score the building, some of them are going to score forests, some of them are going to score rows, columns, farmlands, water. It all depends on those cards, so you're really trying to plan out each of the turns and where you want to write that information on your map. The game's really simple. You have a deck of cards that has 13 cards in it. These are called Explorer cards. These cards are going to come up one at a time, and every player is going to make a choice on this card on how they want to draw on their map according to these cards. Also, you have some ambush cards. There are 4 of these. Since there's going to be 4 rounds or 4 seasons, a new one is going to be interjected into these deck of cards each round. But let's talk about how you play the game. It's like we said, it's pretty simple. First thing you're going to do is you're going to place one of these ambush cards inside of the deck at random. No one knows where it is and which card it is. And then you're simply going to turn over the top card. Now, the cards in the deck are really unique. There's a wide variety. I'll talk about your main cards. I'll let you talk about terrains and ambushes. Sure. So the first thing you're going to notice on all of these cards is the amount of time that it takes for this card to take place. In this case, it's 1 time. Each of these different seasons require a specific amount of time. In case of spring, it's 8. These cards are going to lay on top of previous cards that have come before it. And once you meet that threshold of time, that's going to denote a scoring round.
That's right.
So each of these cards, though, have a variety of different information on it. The first thing, you're going to see a line here that tells you the type of terrain that you can draw on your map. The second thing is broken into possibly 2, 3 different things below. These are like Tetris patterns that you're filling in according to the terrain type that you choose. So first, you're picking the terrain type. In this case, it's just water. And then you get to either pick drawing it in a 3 column or drawing it in this weird sideways W column. You can always turn this card in your head imaginally, but you can never flip it to the other side.
You can't mirror it.
You can't mirror it by any means. Some of them also give you a coin. So if I use this particular side, I gain a coin. I write that, or I fill in that portion of my map by filling in a coin area. And then I get to draw that. And the rules are, you can pretty much draw anywhere that you wish. There's no rules. It's really you trying to spatially figure out how are these cards going to score and where are they going to score compared to the other things I've already drawn on the map.
Yeah, you're not limited, like you said, you're not limited by the cards, but these cards are very specific. They might want certain terrains to be next to each other, certain terrains to not be next to each other, things like that. And there are 5 different terrain types. There's houses, which houses, as they're placed together, actually form little communities. And the rules for that are a little different in that, like, you look at an entire sector of houses, and that's one city.
Yeah.
Then there's rivers, there's forests, there's fields, farmlands, but these things don't have to touch in any way. You could put those houses out randomly and never really have any kind of big settlements, but you're not going to score a lot of points that way.
Yeah, if you look at the very first edict here, which we'll score at the end of spring, it requires you to have 6 houses in a cluster, and for each one that you have, you score 8 points. So in that case, you want to have a cluster over here, you want to have a cluster over here, and so forth. All right, so one thing we'll talk about before we talk about the other types of cards is the map itself. When you look at the map, it's basically just a blank slate for you to draw whatever you want to have. However, there are mountains in here, and there's also ruins. And we'll talk about the ruins when we talk about the ruin cards. I'll talk about the mountains because it's very simple. The moment that you orthogonally place a piece of terrain on all 4 sides of a mountain, you then get to circle one of your coins on the bottom. You have this row across the bottom that's going to constitute of coins. And these are going to be recurring points. So you want to get coins down as early as possible. Usually coins only come in the form of drawing around the mountains or using very small sections of the card. So you're not drawing as much on your map, but you are filling those out.
Yeah, you got to have to make that decision because those coins can be very valuable.
Yep.
And only certain cards give you the option to even choose a coin. So you don't want to pass on them too much when they come your way.
Yep. The second type of card that could possibly be drawn outside of your terrain cards are the ruin cards. When you draw the ruin card, something very special has to happen.
Yeah, so the first thing you're going to do is leave that ruin card right where it is, and then draw another card to place on top of it. Now, this other card impacts the game the exact same way as normal, except you have to draw it through one of the ruin symbols on your map. And you're going to see these little ruin symbols that appear here. You have to cross through them. If you can't, then you do get a consolation prize. You get to place 1 block of any terrain anywhere. So you're losing out on whatever pattern you would have been able to build. So while you can cover these ruins at any point in time, you kind of want to leave them open specifically for when those ruin cards are drawn.
And there's also goals in here that want you to cover your ruins up. So there's a point, do I want to cover them up for points, depending upon the Queen's Edict, or do I want to just cover them up to make clusters for other things? The last type of card that you can draw are the ambush cards. These are really unique. There's 4 of them, and one of them is going to be introduced in every season. If these cards don't come up in a season, it's going to stay in that deck when it's reshuffled. So you could have 2, 3, maybe even 4 if they never come up. But when they do come up, they affect everyone at the table. They're going to be removed from the game, so you're only going to see them once. And this is how they work. These also too have a pattern on them. But the trick is, the moment this is drawn, you lay this in front of you on the table, then everyone takes their map and they pass it either clockwise or counterclockwise according to the symbol. And the other players draw that horrible, horrible monster on your board. That's going to impact you during scoring.
Yeah, you can do a couple things with these monsters. First of all, you can use it to break up people's scoring. If they want to have fields next to water, you can put that monster in some empty space in between and let them never connect. But also, you're going to lose negative points for having empty spaces around those monsters. So if Jeremy sees me building off in one corner, trying to complete this objective, he can throw a monster completely on the other side of the map. Now I have to start adding terrain down there, or I take a ton of negative points. And some of these monsters cover a wide variety of space, so you can have a lot of negative points that build up.
All right, so when does a season end? We already kind of mentioned this. You're going to stack these cards sequentially each time a new one comes out. The moment that this time equals the current season that you're in this case, spring, you're going to stop play and you're going to score. And everyone scores simultaneously. There are 4 things you're going to score for. 1, Edict A. 2, Edict B. And again, that's according to the spring. So in summer, you're going to score B and C. In the fall, C and D. And then in the winter, A and D. So these are kind of wrap around as you go. The third thing you score for are the coins. Every single coin that you filled out is going to give you 1 victory point at that time. So you're going to recur those victory points through all 4 of the seasons. And the final thing you score for, or you don't score for, is the monsters.
Those monsters, yeah. And so spaces aren't counted more than once. So if you have 2 monsters next to each other and there's a space in the middle, you still only lose the points 1 time. But you could lose 6, 8, even 10 points for some of these monsters if you don't quickly get in there.
All right, so you're going to play that for 4 seasons. At the end of the game, you're going to tally up all your victory points, and the winner has the most is going to obviously be the best cartographer in the land. All right, review time. Let's talk about this. There's been so many roll and writes, right? It seems to be like the big fad, but I appreciate games like this that don't require dice. It doesn't change the dynamic too much, but it's just a different way to approach it. And this is definitely very different than the other roll and writes we've played.
You could not do this game with dice.
No.
The way that these Tetris pieces come out and the way these patterns appear makes for a very interesting puzzle that you really can only get with these cards. It really causes you to think and really try to be spatially aware of what you're doing when you're making these decisions, because a lot of these cards, it's not just which pattern do you want to use, it's which terrain do you want to use.
Right.
So while it seems like, okay, we don't get multiple cards to choose from, we only draw one card a turn, but our maps are going to end up looking drastically different by the end of the game.
I mean, it's 11 by 11 grids, so you have a massive amount of a sandbox to play in. And like we said, you can place these patterns wherever you want. It's completely up to the player, so it's completely player controlled. You don't have to build off previous sections. You're free to do whatever you want. And that's the great part about the game. You're looking at, you see all the goals at the beginning, right? You see everything that you need to score for right at the start of the game. It's just spatially puzzling that out, and then hopefully you get the right cards to flip at the right time, and then hopefully the monsters don't mess you up too much.
Right, I think that's one thing I really like about this game is the monsters. They add a really cool concept of and it seems kind of silly, everyone passes your sheet around, but you have to think about it. Like, you get to look at someone else's board and like, how can I mess with their board? How can I cause the most kind of chaos possible? And that's a really fun thing to think about. You're kind of looking across the table like, oh, wait, where's Jeremy putting my monster, right? And you want to make that choice.
Right. I also love the variability in the game too. Having 4 different cards for each of these different scoring types, you're going to get a different game every time. Not only are you going to get something different for the type you're scoring, but the way that they all combine together. So you have times when you want to have houses in clusters. There's times you want to have them next to mountains or the side of the board. Sometimes you want to have them in diagonal lines. It really depends upon the combination. And you get some really weird combination of scoring cards in here.
Yeah, and I think that combination is what makes this game so interesting to score and to puzzle out. Because you kind of get in the habit of some games where you just kind of want to do the same strategy every time.
Right.
Well, in this situation, like, a card might come out that wants you to put rivers next to water. And you're like, okay, last time I did this a certain way, but maybe this time you also want rivers next to mountains in another card. So you have to look at all 4 cards as a whole.
Right.
You can't just focus on one because you're only scoring some of these cards, once or twice. You can't just focus on one and abandon the others.
I'll also be remiss if I didn't mention that on the pre-sale page, there's a second set of cards that you can use that are going to sit in the middle of the board, and people can actually cross out their coins to be able to use those abilities.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
we didn't even get those, but I'm excited to try those as well.
I think that gives you a little more to do because as it is, the coins just kind of sit there and score you points, which is really valuable. But you can't spend them on anything, which seems counterintuitive to like the idea of having coins.
And the final thing too that I like is the variability on the backside. You have a whole nother side that you can play on. So these sheets that are included in the game, you have 2 sides you can play on. One side is definitely going to mess it up with that big ravine in there. So you really have to spatially puzzle out some of these things as well. Do you have any more positives?
I mean, just the art, again, it's a role-player universe, right?
Yeah.
So like all the artwork is fantastic.
Sure.
The idea behind the game is really cool of charting out this new land. I mean, I really like this universe that they're creating for sure.
Negatives. What do you have for negatives?
So first of all, and this goes off of what we were saying, it is just a pure puzzle. There's not a lot of restrictions. You can do basically whatever you want, put your pieces wherever you want, which means you can really get yourself into trouble really fast, especially if you're not really great at spatial puzzling. Like, you can find yourself in some pretty bad positions. So I think the score of this game can be really swingy if you get players that can't quite grasp how these pieces are supposed to interconnect over the course of the game.
Right, there's not really a course correction in the game. These cards are flipped randomly, so if you burn a couple of those cards that may have the only forests in the game, and you need those forests to score, it's going to be probably the next season before you'll possibly see those cards again. So you really do have to, I don't know if this is a negative, but you really do have to pay attention to all the goals, not just the goals you're trying to succeed in that round, because each of them are going to be scored at least once, sometimes twice in the case of the A card.
Yeah, and then when it comes to those monsters, I just think this game definitely favors experienced players. You want to play it a couple times. And I don't know, for some people that might be something to turn them away. Other people are going to love that because the more you play this game, the higher your score is going to get because you're going to start to see the way these pieces all connect across your entire board.
Cool. Anything else?
That's it for me.
All right, so that is Cartographers. It's from Thunderworks Games. It is a 1 to... I love saying this. 1 to 100 players. Yes, you can play with 100 players. You probably go through every sheet in the box on the first try. If you guys have any questions, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do. And we'll catch you guys next time.